Bill, you say the now spans the period of time existing between the establishment of the Jewish state of Israel, which happened in 1948, and the fulfillment of Ezekiel 38 and 39. Now is where mankind is presently situated on the prophetic timeline. We exist between these two marquee events. And even though Ezekiel 38, 39 is kind of future, it's not really now. I don't think, we're not going to be here. I think you would agree, Bill, we're not going to be here for Ezekiel 38, 39. Would I be right?
Yeah, I have reasons that I put forward in both the DVD and the book as to why we will more than likely not be here, and if time permitting, we can talk about a few of those. But you're right, I find us in between those two monumental book and prophetic events right now.
I want to play just a real quick soundbite. It happens to be Mark Hitchcock, and it's building on what Eric and Bill and I are talking about, and that is the topic that we're dealing with is so important. At the same time, the indifference and apathy and just plain folks not wanting to go there never been so prominent as it is now, but that's a fulfillment of prophecy in itself. We can say more about that in just a minute. Let me just play a short soundbite. It's less than 2 minutes, and Dr. Mark Hitchcock says that apocalypse is in the air. Well, if that's the case, why aren't more people listening up?
Just a practical reason why Bible prophecy is important now is that people everywhere are thinking about it. I mean, just out in our secular culture today, people are thinking about the end times. I like to just put it like this: apocalypse is in the air. It's just kind of a sense that people have that this world is getting near closing time. In fact, I read a recent poll that said 41% of Americans, this isn't Christians, 41% of Americans believe the end times have arrived. More than 3/4 of evangelicals, that's about 77%, more than half of Protestants, about 54%, agree that the world is currently living in the end times as described in the prophecies of the Bible. There's a poll that just came out, in fact, it just came out Friday, says this, the title says, many Americans link U.S. military strike in Syria to end times. It says the threat of airstrikes against Syria has more than a few Americans thinking about the end of the world. A recent poll from Nashville-based Lifeway Research found that almost 1 in 3 Americans see Syria's recent conflict as part of the Bible's plan for the end times. So 1 out of 3 people see that as part of the Bible's plan. 1 in 4 think a U.S. military strike in Syria could lead to Armageddon. And 1 in 5 believe that the world will end in their lifetime. So this isn't Christians. 1 out of 5 people out there in America believe the world is going to end in their lifetime. You've got all these movies out there and all these books that are about these post-apocalyptic scenarios. So obviously people are highly interested in this. And so to me, whenever there's that kind of interest about anything out there in our culture, the church needs to move in and to answer that need.
The church needs to move in and answer the need of those who are questioning. And yet the church is backing away from this topic. I can't emphasize how many emails I get and letters that state that. Bill, how about you?
Yeah, it's very disappointing and very sad that there's an apathy out there. It's a very important message for our time. The theme of an end times, a latter days, a time of the end, is central in the Bible, and it plainly speaks about it. And it's information that we need to possess if we're approaching those events, because they're globally impacting events. And I agree 100% with Dr. Hitchcock. We need to get this message out, but unfortunately, a lot of the pulpits today don't believe that's going to fill the pews on the next Sunday if we start talking about, the book of Revelation or, Middle East events or the destruction of Damascus and Isaiah 17, things like that.
Before I got saved, just shortly before, I got saved in 1981. But in the late 60s into the 70s, if you would advertise a prophecy conference, people would be clamoring to get in the door an hour early. Today, you can't convince people of the need that the church has to understand these things, yet we're the ones living right in the middle of these signs being fulfilled. That's another thing that maybe disturbs me too, is the fact that we have some well-known preachers out there preaching that, there's no signs being fulfilled today. These are people who believe in prophecy, believe in the events, don't think it's allegory. Certainly we don't think it's allegory either. But they're also saying these things aren't being fulfilled, nothing's happening. That disturbs me when we have these surefire signs right out of the scriptures happening right in front of us, yet we seem to be aloof of them.
You're listening to Understanding the Times Radio. I'm Jan Markell. I have on the line from California Bill Salas. Actually shared a platform with Bill a year ago, a prophecy conference in the Twin City area. And we're carrying his newest DVD, The Now Prophecies. And they include the disaster in Iran, the destruction of Damascus, the decline of America, the final Arab-Israeli war, and much more. Eric Barger's in studio with me. Bill, let's just hit a couple of these now prophecies. The destruction of Damascus. I'm sure you're watching the situation in Syria probably more than I am. And by the way, it's extremely depressing to watch the situation over there. If you've seen some of the aerial shots of what Damascus looks like today, you would think it's obliterated right now. It actually isn't. So how do you think this will play out, the Isaiah 17, Jeremiah 49, 23 through 27?
Well, if you look at the prophecy literally in Isaiah 17, it says that Damascus will cease to be a city. It will be a ruinous heap. In other words, this oldest continuously inhabited city in recorded history, the capital of Syria, which, as you state, is in shambles right now, someday will no longer exist. And what's alarming is that it says in verse 14 of Isaiah 17, one evening you see Damascus, but in the morning it's gone. It's reduced to rubble. And so we could wake up one morning and Damascus will no longer exist. And a lot of people believe that this is already starting to happen, but we have to be clear when we read these prophecies to take every detail to heart and literally. And in verse 9 of Isaiah 17, it says that this is caused by the children of Israel. It says there's desolation caused by the children of Israel. So it's not the Syrian revolution that's taking place. It's the Israeli Defense Forces. And to give credit to the Israeli Defense Forces, as you read the entire prophecy, they're not being an aggressor. They're responding in self-defense. This is the thing, because this is why it's a now prophecy. Presently, Syria they're not at peace with Israel, like Egypt and Jordan. They have threatened Israel. If Israel were to attack Syria, which Israel has been doing to protect themselves with Hezbollah and all that they would attack Tel Aviv. And in response, Israel has said, if you attack Tel Aviv, we will take out Damascus. So we're listening to these news headlines, and this is, to me, could happen at any given time. And especially with Russia being over-involved now, and ISIS, and there's this revolution. Iran's getting involved. Hezbollah's in there. This is all just to the northeast of Israel's northern border. So it's just really incredible right now.
You know, Bill, I was going to bring the same thing up, that this isn't just one player against Israel. This is a convolution of different forces against one another, with ISIS coming against the leaders of Syria, with Israel having to keep them at bay. We know Putin wants to keep propping up the leader of Syria. It goes on and on and on.
Bill, the disaster in Iran, and that's Jeremiah 49, 34 through 39. Talk to us just for a few minutes about that.
Well, Iran's actually got a lot said about its future.
Yes,
biblically.
it does.
Ezekiel 38 is the one that has a lot of information. It's labeled as Persia in there, but at the same time Ezekiel wrote, actually a little prior, Jeremiah wrote a prophecy in chapter 49 about Elam, ancient Elam. It's been vastly overlooked, but I believe it's a prophecy for our time. And in fact, Jan, I think it could be actually the next biblical prophecy to find fulfillment. And the reason I say that is this prophecy talks about the Lord being fiercely angry with the leadership of Iran. He's fiercely angry with them because they want to launch something lethal somewhere, and he's going to prevent that from happening. And in the process of preventing that from happening, a disaster occurs, it says, and there's a fleeing of refugees out of the area. It's a humanitarian crisis. And when you look at Iran's history, and you look at the details of this prophecy, I do believe the Lord is furious with Iran presently, and they do want to have a nuclear weapon. They do want to have intercontinental ballistic missiles. They're developing all that. They want to wipe Israel off the map, and yet God is going to uphold his holy name through Israel, it says in Ezekiel 39, verse 7, and yet Iran wants to take them off of the map. See, people don't understand how dangerous this nuclear deal is.
I know.
It's been consummated this past July 2015. So I'm just trying to alert people, look, let's get the biblical perspective of the events that you're seeing going on in the world, because watching the news media, you're going to get the political pundits and the military analysts, and they're going to do the best they can to tell you what's going on and what they would suggest is going to happen, but they're not being able to come to you with prophetic or biblical aspects. And all I'm trying to do in this book and DVD is let people know, look, here's what the Bible says about the events you're watching on the news right now.